Do you want to study in the United States but don't know where to start when it comes to searching for graduate programs? Well, stay tuned because in today's video, we're going to be talking about how to find the right graduate program for you. Wagwan YouTube. It's Naleen, your Jamaican scholar, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about some of the things that you should be looking at when you are evaluating graduate programs. Let me explain what PhD programs tend to be like in the United States. PhD programs in the United States tend to last from anywhere from 3 years to 5 years or even longer, depending on how the rate at which the student is progressing. But the program is divided into two sections. You have the taught section of the program, which is where you're required to take a certain number of credit hours, and that will vary from university to university of classes. And those classes are your theoretical basis or your foundation for your program, and that will help you to prepare to actually do independent research. And so classes can be, you can be taking classes for a year and a half, 2 years, or 2.5 years, sometimes even up to 3 years, to make sure that you have the theoretical foundation that is needed to conduct research. But as you are taking classes, you will find that all of your classes, because you are a master's student or a PhD student, a certain quality of work is required. You might find also that there are final papers, mostly a lot of research based work is being done, and your final papers tend to be more research work that is of publication quality. That's what a lot of the professors will require, and that will help you in terms of submitting those final papers to conferences, because during that taught portion of your studies, that's when you begin to start submitting your work to conferences to present, and hopefully be able to actually begin to even submit your work to publications to get published, because an unwritten part of your PhD program is actually getting experience presenting your work among your peers, meaning other academics, and also publishing your work, because that is something that you're going to need when you're going out on the job market. Most job adverts will not just say that they want a PhD from an accredited program, but they're going to be saying that they want somebody who has a record of or potential to publish in high impact scholarly journals. And so how you show your potential is by actually going to conferences and actually publishing. You might not be publishing in the top journals in your field, but if you're publishing in journals and you can work your way up to actually publishing in top journals, then that is something. So an unwritten part of that taught part of your program is actually producing final papers that are of good enough quality that you are able to present them at conferences and or publish those works in journals. The second part of the program is the independent part, and this is after you have finished your classes and you have done what is called your qualifying exams. Different schools call it different things, but for a lot of people it is their quals or their qualifying exams, and this is where you and the exam itself will differ from university to university, or even within university it will differ from program to program, but you will take some type of assessment, and that will show to your school, to your committee, that you are ready to enter the second phase of your studies, which is independent research. And this is where you begin to work on your dissertation. Now, how that works is that once you pass that exam, you become a PhD candidate. And as a PhD candidate, you begin to do the research that will form your dissertation. So you do the initial part of the work, which is you're working on your prospectus or your proposal. So you work on your proposal. You will have to present that proposal in a defense to your to your committee. Your committee will then approve your proposal, and then you begin to actually collect data, write up your results, and then you actually defend your final project. And once you have defended your final project, if you pass, then you actually say that you're finished, you get a PhD. Now, clearly, you might be required to make some revisions, to do some additional work after your defense, do paperwork and all of that. But the PhD program is two parts. It's the third part, and then at that part you're a PhD student, and then once you have done your qualifying exams or your prelims, then you become a candidate, and in your candidacy period, that is when you actually work on your dissertation. Now, in evaluating programs, you probably want to know whether or not the program is online or in person. Now, if you are outside of the United States and you want to study at a US university online, then clearly you would want to make sure that that program that you are interested in is offered online at that university. If, however, you are looking for a face-to-face program, then you would want to know whether or not some of the classes are offered online, if any of the classes are offered online, if there are any components of the degree program that are offered online. Now, even though you might be taking a face-to-face program, you might find that you're taking one or two online classes as part of your degree program. So if online learning is something that you are not comfortable with, then you definitely should take that into consideration. Now, one of the other things to consider is whether or not the university itself has a physical location, or it only offers online programs. Now, I mention this because what tends to happen is that you have universities that are brick and mortar universities, but who offer online programs. Some very highly ranked, very reputable universities offer online degree programs that you can take advantage of. While there are other universities, some of them are non-profits, that only offer online degree programs. And then there are the for-profit universities that are pretty much mostly online, and in many instances those for-profit institutions don't even use the regular textbooks that you can purchase on Amazon. They have textbooks that they sell to you at very, very high prices. So you want to take a look at the institution to see, is it a brick and mortar institution that offers online program, or is it an online institution? And if it is an online institution, is it a non-profit institution or is it a for-profit institution? Because there's going to be a definite difference between a for-profit institution and a non-profit institution. Always try to go to a non-profit institution. And in an ideal world, it would be nice to go to a university that has a brick and mortar setup where students actually go to face-to-face classes, but your particular program is online. So you actually have a campus that you can fly and go to if you have a problem. There is somebody you can go and meet in an office, right? There is some kind of governing body that you can reach out to if you have particular issues. Another thing that you should look at is accreditation. Now, almost all of these universities will tell you that they're accredited, but you want to look at the accreditation body. So for example, if you are going to look at a business school, then that business school should be AACSB accredited. In the United States, especially if you're going to do a PhD, look at the job adverts for PhDs. It says that you should get your PhD from an AACSB accredited university. So that means that if you are going to a school that is accredited by the League of Business Schools, the truth is, to go out on the job market with a degree from a institution that is accredited by the League of Business Schools means nothing. You have wasted your time, you have wasted your money, right? And because of that, I would say you really need to look at accreditation. What is the accreditation body for your degree program, your area of study, and make sure that that program is accredited. That program is accredited by that accrediting body. And just to bear in mind here, guys, that while an entire university might be a good university, the fact is your program itself is what you should be looking at, the accreditation of your program, because different programs have different accrediting bodies and you should be paying attention to that. In a previous video I mentioned that the ranking of your program is something that you should look at, and the US News and World Report does these college rankings every year and rank for best value and rank for graduation rate and rank what is the best MBA program and what is the best online MBA program, what is the best social work degree. And so you should be checking the ranking of the program. Clearly higher ranked programs might end up costing you some more money, and you don't necessarily have to go to a top program to get a good job, but you shouldn't be going to an awful program either, right? Because then you have wasted money, especially if you're from a foreign country studying in the US. So with the currency, and you've spent so much money, and then your degree isn't worth the paper it's printed on, that would not be good, right? Another thing, and a very important thing that you should look at, is faculty. Now, not just faculty in terms of who is going to teach me, but also their research interests. So if you are someone who is thinking of doing your master's or your PhD and you would like to do research in a particular area, then you should be looking at the profiles, the CVs of the faculty to see what not only what do they teach, but what they've been doing research in and what they've been publishing in. US universities normally have faculty profiles, and on the faculty profile it tells you about that professor, where they got their PhD, what modules they teach, what their research interests are, but also their CV is linked, and so you can look at their CV to see what their most recent publications have been, right? And that will tell you kind of what stream of research that professor has been engaged in recent times, and that will tell you whether or not there are actually people within that department or school that will be able to work with you, because there's nothing more disappointing than having your goals in terms of what you would like to have be your research focus, but when you get to the institution, there is nobody who is a specialist or an expert in that area, and so you have to choose something else just to be able to graduate. So you do want to check what the research interests are of the faculty, right? Another thing that you should be looking at is, are they supervising work? When you look at the professor's CVs, you will also see whether or not they have supervised master's thesis or doctoral dissertations. And those professors that are actually supervising students and graduating students, like getting them through the system and out, those are the professors that you should be looking at to say, okay, this university seems like it has a fairly good rate of getting people out of the program. You have some people who have been doing their PhD for 10 years, right? 15 years. You don't want that. Well, US universities, they have a limit on how long after you have entered candidacy you have to actually finish your program, and those having those requirements is actually quite useful. Other things that you should be looking at: time to completion. So as I mentioned, PhD programs will vary, also master's programs will vary, and so you want to know how long the program should take to complete, because that actually helps for financial planning. In addition to that, you want to know whether or not the university offers funding and whether or not they offer funding for the entire duration. So some programs will say they only offer funding for 2 years, or they only offer funding for 3 years, or the program itself is 4 years or 5 years. So you know straight off the bat that for a year or two you might be on your own when it comes to funding. Some programs also fund they're automatically fund their PhD students while other programs do not. And so you want to know what the funding structure is like at the university. You also want to know whether or not, if when it comes to time to completion, whether or not you could be asked to leave the program if you are not finished within a particular time, because that does happen. Bear in mind that graduation rates are things that helps with the ranking of a university, and so they have to be able to keep their graduation rates up. And that means getting people through the door. And of course, that's good for programs. If programs are good for getting people through the door, then you know that you're actually going to finish, and hopefully finish within a reasonable period of time. You're not going to get old and gray at that program waiting to graduate. Another thing to think about is course scheduling. Do they offer courses only in the fall and spring, which is between August and May, or do they offer classes year round? One thing that I did in order to finish my program was to take classes all year round, even in the summertime. But that is only an option if your university schedules classes for your program straight through the year, and so you are able to actually progress a little bit faster if that's an option. So you want to know, if you have in your mind that you want to get through the program at an accelerated pace, then you would definitely want to be looking at a university that offers classes all year round. I mentioned that funding is definitely something that you should consider, whether or not you can get a teaching assistantship. That is something to ask. And another thing is whether or not scholarships are available. And that is something that can be offered within your college or school, or it can be offered within the graduate school, which is over all the graduate programs. Or if your university is like the university that I attended, that they might even have personnel that are working at the university that help students to identify external scholarships. So at Florida State, where I attended, there was an Office of Graduate Fellowships and Awards, and all their job was to help their students get scholarships. So they had a database of scholarships. They knew when those scholarships open, when they close, what the requirements were. They also helped you with writing personal statements, putting together your documents. And so whether or not the university offers scholarships, or they offer scholarships support for applying for scholarships, is something that you probably want to be looking at in evaluating programs. Another thing that you should be considering is diversity. And I say this against the backdrop of depending on where you're coming from, you might be used to a predominantly black setting or a more diverse setting, and so you would be probably more comfortable at an institution that is more diverse. Now, you do have institutions that are considered to be predominantly white in the United States, and you also have HBCUs, or historically black colleges and universities. Now, the historically black colleges and universities were developed to serve the African American community during segregation, and these universities continue to exist even now that they have integrated. But as the name suggests, they are historically black and tend to be predominantly minority. And so if you are looking for that type of experience, you probably want to be looking at the HBCUs. You can also look at a predominantly white institution, because a lot of those predominantly white institutions do have diversity mandates where they're trying to increase diversity on campus. And so you might find that predominantly white institution may have even more incentives for minority students, or more scholarship opportunities, more funding opportunities for minority students, just because they are trying to increase their diversity. But one thing to note is that you might want to know what percentage of that campus is minority, so that you can know if that is something that you are prepared to live with. So you just need to be prepared for the level of diversity that will exist on your campus. I attended a predominantly white institution. I had a fabulous time at my university. So I'm definitely not saying that if you are of a particular ethnic background, then you should go to a PWI or you should go to a HBCU. However, you should know what the level of diversity is on your campus. And not just diversity, but you should also consider inclusion in terms of programming and structures that are there to support minority populations on campus. So, for example, does the university, in terms of student orgs, do they have a Black student union? Do they have a Black graduate student organization? Do they have other minority serving institution organizations? Do they have, for example, do they have a Pan-Hellenic Council? Do they do those things? Because do they have a Caribbean Student Association? Do they have an Iranian Student Association, a Hispanic Student Association? Those are some of the things that you can look at to say, will I be able to find my community on campus? And for a lot of people, that's an important consideration. I recall that when I initially started graduate school, I didn't have a community and I wasn't enjoying myself. As soon as I found my community, which became the Black Graduate Student Association and the Congress of Graduate Students, I found my community. And you notice that I said one was a minority serving institution, but the other one was just student government. Once I found my community, I was happy. I also found my community in the Center for Hispanic Marketing Communications. And so I was a part of a number of different organizations that definitely helped me to feel like I belonged on campus. And so I would say inclusion, not just diversity, but also inclusion. What is the university doing? Are there structures there that are meant to make sure that all the various communities on campus feel included, feel at home, feel as if they have a voice in the space? That could be something that is very, very important for your mental health, right? And to make sure that you don't leave after one semester because you can't find your people and you don't feel at home. Because the truth is, graduate programs are long. They are 18 months and longer if you're doing a PhD. And it is challenging to be by yourself for those extended periods of time. And so I would say definitely look into inclusion. Another thing to look at if you are an international student is international student support. How big is the international student office? What is their staff complement? How many advisors do they have? Do they have advisors for F1 students, which are the persons who are on the regular student visas? Do they have J1 students, which is for the international exchange or the scholarship students? Do they have programming for international students that's organized through the international student office? Because the more activities and programs that the international student office shows that they have, it shows that they are very active in serving their international student population. And as an international student on campus, you do want an international student office that is going to be responsive to your needs. If you are an international student, one thing that you might want to consider is location. Location in terms of proximity to international airports. If it is that you live in a town with only a regional airport, you might want to consider that flights to go home might be very, very expensive, right? For example, when I was a student at FSU, the Tallahassee airport was just a regional airport. It became an international airport just as I was leaving. But living in a city that only had a regional airport, it meant that flying home meant that I had to go from Tallahassee to another city and then from that city back to Jamaica. And that meant the flights were a bit more expensive. If I wanted to circumvent that expensive flight, I had to drive to Atlanta to get a direct flight home. And so an international airport means the possibility of a direct flight to your home country, and that is going to cut down the cost of travel back and forth significantly. Clearly, if you're coming from the African continent or Asia or Europe, you might find that no matter which way you take it, it's going to be expensive to travel. But again, living in cities where there are no international airports in that city or even within an hour or two of that city, it could mean a little bit more expense. Now, that's not to say that you shouldn't choose a program because it is a little bit more remote. In fact, those college towns tend to be some of the best towns. I wouldn't trade my experience at FSU for anything, even though I would have had to drive like 2.5 2 hours to Jacksonville, which I didn't want to go to Jacksonville because if I was going to fly to Jamaica from Jacksonville, I still would have to connect somewhere else. I had to drive really 4 or 5 hours to go to Atlanta if I wanted to fly home at a more affordable price. But I wouldn't trade that for anything. But it's a consideration, not necessarily the most important consideration, but definitely something that you should consider. Now, I have said a mouthful. If you have any questions about some of the things that I mentioned, definitely put it in the comments below. If there are any topics related to higher education that you would like me to cover on this channel, definitely go ahead and put that in the comments below as well. I want to thank you so much for watching this video. If you're new to this channel, please go ahead and click that subscribe button. Also, click on notifications so that you know when I upload a new video. This is Naleen Leslie Piper, your Jamaican scholar, saying, walk good.